Hello.
Is that Marilee?
Yes, hello.
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 All right, guys.
So many.
You're live, so go ahead.
Okay, I will call us to order. We will start with attendance. Suzanne,
Present.
Patrick,
Present.
John.
Here.
Do we have Bill? Greg?
Here.
Welcome, Greg. Mike? And Marilee.
Hello.
Great. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes from the last meeting? And thank you very much to Suzanne for running that meeting.
I move.
Great, go for it.
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Great, thank you, John. I will vote aye. Suzanne?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Kim?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
You can actually, I think, Greg, you can safely abstain since you were not present at the last meeting, if that's all right. Does that sound okay?
I will safely abstain.
Great. And Marilee?
Aye.
Great. Wonderful. Minutes are approved. I'll turn it to Megan for announcements, and she will introduce Greg.
All right. Well, we are giving a warm welcome to Greg Rieger, our newest member. He was voted in this month by Town Council, and we're really excited to have him on board. I think it would be great if we could maybe go around the room really fast and just say perhaps how long we've been with the board. And then, Greg, if give you an opportunity to give yourself a quick introduction.
Sure. Hi, Greg. I'm Katie Schaff. Welcome to the board. We're really happy to have you, and I look forward to hearing about your interests and your motivation for being on the board. I have been on the board since its inception, and I'm really grateful to town staff. I think they've guided us capably, and if you have any questions, I think they'll be quite helpful.
I met Greg earlier at the orientation, so we can go ahead and skip me in the interest of time.
Well, I'm Marilee. I'm been on the board since its inception, and I welcome you as well. Look forward to meeting you in person.
Patrick, would you like to go?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'll go next. Hey, Greg, welcome aboard, sir. Patrick Adams. I'm a local developer here in Apex, and was asked to be part of the board. I guess what, 6 months or 7 months ago, maybe something like that. So it's I was glad to be asked by planning staff for sure.
Great.
Look forward to working with you.
John, would you like to go next?
Sure. John Garrison. I've been on the board as long as Katie. I'm an Apex citizen, and I'm interested in environmental issues in the town.
Great. Kim, would you like to go? And Mike, I do see you.
Sure. Kim Pearson. I've been on the board since early this year, maybe. I am an engineer and I have an interest in lighting, so I am currently leading our dark sky work group. So if you're interested in lighting, let me know.
Mike, we are just introducing ourselves to Greg, who is our new member. So if you'd like to go next, that'd be appreciated.
Sure. Hey, Greg, thanks for joining the board. I think like a couple others here, I was one of the original appointees, and it's been a great fun time and interesting serving a mostly digital capacity at at a time where we really benefit from collaboration and meeting together. But it's an honor and a privilege, a learning experience every meeting, and the staff is incredible. So utilize that as much as possible. My background's I work at a small public affairs firm in Raleigh, and have had some traditional experience in environmental spaces, and I don't know how much anybody else said before I got on, so I will stop now.
That was perfect. Greg, if you would like to go next.
So thank you. It's nice to meet everyone. Looking forward to working with you all and serving on this environmental advisory board. I have lived in Apex for about 2.5 years. I work for the city of Raleigh in their budget office as a budget analyst and strategic planning and performance analyst. So within the city of Raleigh, I support their growth and natural resources strategic focus area. So coordinating with all the departments within the city of Raleigh to see how Raleigh can manage growth. So interested in trying to bring some of that experiences and background here with the town that I live in. I'm a lead AP and I just got solar panels last year. So thank you all for supporting those policies as well.
Thanks, Greg. Welcome aboard. Megan, do we have further announcements?
That's all I have.
Great. You may go ahead to committee updates.
All right, onward. Bee City Committee, they just met yesterday, in fact. Neither Val nor I were able to make it to that meeting, and we haven't received any minutes yet, but we know that they are still working on the neighborhood recognition program, and I believe their next meeting will be in December. We plan to do a presentation there at Bee City at the December meeting to introduce the Living Wall pilot project for the sustainability program. For Tree Cap, their last meeting was September 4th. Their October meeting was canceled, and the next meeting is November 4th. So we're also waiting on more feedback from them as well. I have started to include the Apex Community Coalition. Believe that it is of interest to you all since they manage a lot of environmental initiatives. And right now they are working on a curbside compost survey for the community. That's all I have.
Oh, I'm going to add to the announcements. Some of you were with me. I think Megan and Suzanne were there. At Peak Fest, someone came up to me who believed he lived in a neighborhood where it was impossible to compost. And I passed along information to him, and he texted me yesterday that he is now composting.
Oh, wonderful.
I feel pretty good about it.
Wins. Awesome.
Good.
Does anyone else have any other announcements, or are we ready to go ahead to the rezoning meeting? Great. I think we're ready.
All right, so we'll proceed with the Viridia rezoning project. And right now in the lobby, I have Jessica Hardesty and Laura Holloman, and I will admit them now. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Laura.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Are you both on?
Yes, good evening.
Okay, I can only see one of you. I apologize. Jessica, I'm Katie. Welcome to the meeting. We would love to hear an overview of your project, please, and any proposed environmental conditions.
Sure. Let me share my screen here. I just have a brief presentation I figured I could share with you all.
Thank you.
All right, can you guys see my screen here?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, first, good evening, everyone, and thank you for having us tonight. My name's Jessie Hartstein, and I'm a planner with McAdams, and also on the call we have Laura Holloman from McAdams, and I believe Scott Lay from Rieger Community should be on as well. And so we're in front of you regarding our proposed Viridia rezoning. And I just have a brief presentation, and then I'm happy to open it up to discussion, and Scott, Laura, and I can answer any questions that you might have. So I just wanted to preface that this specific presentation for the AB is probably a little bit different than others you've seen before for other conditional zonings or PUDs. I know I've been in front of you all with a couple different PUD proposals before where we had a specific list of environmental commitments to include in a PUD booklet. But because of the way the code is written for an SD district and really just the nature of this proposal and presentation, it's a little bit different than providing a specific list of commitments since we will be adding these parcels into an existing SD district. So I figured I would just start out with a little bit of background. As you're all likely aware, the Viridia development is located between Highway 1, 55, and then it also spans some across 540. So the colored parcels on the map that you see were rezoned to the SD district back in May of 2011 and was proposed, or I should say still is proposed as a sustainable mixed-use urban community. So overall, this totals about 1,100 acres, and the SD or Sustainable Development Plan is a pretty lengthy zoning document. It's about 136 pages, and this provides the guiding principles for the sustainable development. So additionally, through the SD plan, the property was entitled for 8,000 residential units, 12 million square feet of office and industrial space, 3.5 million square feet of retail, and unrestricted hospitality, healthcare, and community uses. So as you'll see in the image, there are a few gaps in the development, and these areas are outlined in this yellow dashed line. And so these are the parcels or the general areas of where our rezoning application speaks to. So like I said, we're submitting an application to rezone these 9 parcels, and it totals about 100 acres. And these are currently zoned PUD CZ. So this grayish purple area up here is PUD CZ, and that was actually a part of the previous plan that preceded the Viridia SD plan. So that would be bringing that into the SD plan, and then these other parcels here in green are zoned as RR. And so really we would be essentially filling this donut hole that's currently existing in the overall Viridia zoning. So typically, I think when we use the phrase donut hole, someone is usually referring to an annexation. And although this is a rezoning request, it almost seems a little bit like an annexation of sorts as we add in these remaining parcels into the existing SD plan for Viridia. And so Scott might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but at this moment, there's no real specific plan for these individual 9 parcels, but they may be part of a larger plan within the overall Viridia development. I'm so sorry, I'm in the office and they are vacuuming right now. So that being said, bringing these into the existing plan will just allow for a contiguous development. So anyways, that being said, we don't have any specific commitments for these 9 individual parcels because they could be part of a larger site plan. However, I still wanted to highlight what the Viridia development is committed to that you'll see on this slide. So it's committed to over 100 acres of RCA area, over 150 acres of open space. That's both passive and active. A transit-oriented development providing for the potential of a rail spur and bus route, thoroughfare bike lanes and a multi-use trail, as well as greenway connections per the town's master plan. There will be high density and mixed use pods and pods dedicated for economic development. There'll also be land for public schools and then higher education. And so many of these combine allow for a community that emphasizes active transportation options, be it biking and walking, and less vehicular traffic and emissions, and preserves many acres of open space and resource conservation areas. So, as I mentioned before, I know this is a little bit different in nature just because we are adding this into an existing SD plan rather than creating a new PUD with specific new commitments. But I just wanted to highlight some of these existing ones that we do have. So that concludes the brief presentation, and I think I may have addressed some of the questions that had been sent to us ahead of time. But Megan, if you want me to read through those and answer some of those comments here, I can. Otherwise, I can just go ahead and open it up and see if any other questions that you all might have.
It would be great to address the existing comments. And then Katie, perhaps we can open the floor again.
Sure, let me just pull up your questions. I have them in front of me here. One second. So I think that the first one was to provide more information for tree preservation and replacement. So ultimately, I think that would fall back to UDO requirements and then anything further that's set forth in the existing SD plan. I think it speaks a little bit more to tree plantings per the different districts that are in the SD plan. Do we intend to mass grade lots and replace trees? And if so, at what rate? And I think this is asking about these 9 parcels in particular, but really they would be brought into this overall plan where that would be looked at a larger scale and per each site plan that would come in after the rezoning. What is the plan for the pond that's on the development? So if this is non-jurisdictional, the pond would likely be drained. But if it is jurisdictional, then we would work with the Corps from there. And then I think the only other question was regards to tree clearing and stormwater control measures and infrastructure either in zones of the riparian buffers. And so again, that would just be set forth by the UDO and the SD plan. But the riparian buffers for the majority would be preserved and be a part of the overall RCA and open space plan.
Jesse, when this SD plan was approved, what year was it?
That was in 2011.
I guess my concern is the lack of specificity in this. What kind of commitments did y'all agree to in 2011 as part of this?
So there is a very long,
I don't have access to that.
136 page document. Not exactly a light read that I would ask you to sift through. But that really spells out the guidelines for the community.
So
oh, go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going to say, I've been digesting and reading this Viridia SD plan multiple times as I'm the planner for this project now. I've inherited this. There are a lot of commitments in this overall development, and Jesse summarized them at a very high level well. And at the time it was approved, there were some parcels like the 4 that are around the interchange that they wanted to bring in, but they were tied up with use agreements. Some of them were used as soccer fields, I think, and they weren't sure what was going to be needed for the interchange at 540. And so there was the SD zoning district, the Sustainable Development Zoning District, was added to the UDO at the same time that Viridia was approved. And in that, it specified that any parcels within 2,000 feet of the Viridia zoning could be brought into the SD plan. It has to be approved by town council because it's changing the district. But the idea was that this plan would be applied to any parcels within 2,000 feet to help fill in these donut holes and to bring in some of the parcels along the edge that couldn't be brought in to the zoning back when it was originally submitted. So that's just a little bit of the history of the district and what's in the zoning ordinance for the UDO for this zoning district.
So I was reading that document, the 136-page document today, and there's a lot of language in there that are not commitments. It's like to the extent practicable, and then it often just gets reverted to whatever the UDO is. I think in there as well, there was something about only 30-foot buffers on streams. Are the current buffers going to be applied to any streams on these new parcels, or is that 30-foot commitment going to be it? Do you know?
My understanding is that it would not be the 30 feet. It would be more than that based on one of my conversations I had. And then there was some question about the way that was written, whether or not the 30-foot applied. So at that conversation was had like almost 2 years ago. And so I'm going to have to go back through emails to determine that. But I don't know, I don't see Scott. Is Scott in the call?
Amanda, I recall that about 2 years ago as well when we went through the SD plan and made those comments. So yeah, we would anticipate that our normal riparian buffer rules would apply, the 50 and the 100 foot.
Thanks for confirming my memory, Jessica.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And also within that, there was a section about improving the streams. That was a little confusing to me, maintaining or enhancing the aquatic ecosystem in order to restore or improve biodiversity. Does that mean like surveys are going to be done to determine the biodiversity? And then I didn't understand sort of what that meant, as well as augmenting low flow. Is that like trying to increase the base flow, or providing space and ecological conditions that maintain or enhance wildlife or travel corridors? I noticed on the plans that were online, there was like 17 stream crossings throughout the site. Are those crossings just going to be hydrologic conveyances, or are they going to be designed for wildlife passage to sort of get at some of these, I guess, I don't know if they're guiding principles or goals or commitments or not?
Hey, I'll jump in. Laura Hallman, Senior Planner with McAdams. These are all great questions. And if it seems like we pause, it's because we've all inherited this project, right? We're not the authors, and you're exactly right. A lot of them are kind of overarching themes or goals, and sometimes I completely understand, because your questions are our questions too. You know, what's tangible, what actually has teeth in this thing, that you all can, look at and say, well, this is what actually is happening. We're still having a lot of these conversations in real time. We've submitted a master subdivision plan currently with the town of Apex that establishes, basically it reestablishes the pods and kind of updates the infrastructure. The roads have changed somewhat with Apex's transportation plan as they've kind of reimagined, 55 and that access and what that looks like. So I think a lot of the stream crossings were thought to be, traditional, and here comes Scott. Traditional storm quashing. And Scott, I'll let you. Sorry to put you on the spot, so just to introduce you, Scott Lay with Rieger Communities has been the current developer of Viridia, and really has been entrenched in Viridia for the last, I don't know, Scott, how long have you been, has Viridia been your life? 2 years?
Never. It's never been my life. No, we provided, so we have it under contract to purchase right now from the existing landowner. We provided some just real estate advice to the current landowner. So, because I don't think there's ever been anything submitted to the town or anything like that beyond the zoning. So they've had their various ups and downs and their various this, that, and the other, you know, so, but we have the property under contract to purchase. And once we purchase it, you know, we would own it and develop it, you know, along with some of our other stakeholders forward. So we do have a pretty good knowledge of the property just in general. So
Suzanne, if you wanna, I don't mean to make you repeat yourself, and I apologize, but I think Scott is definitely the one to ask regarding. It's kind of an overarching theme, right? She aptly mentioned how, you know, a lot of these seem to be themes and overall goals, but what actually is going to happen at the time of development. And so, Suzanne, I'll tee it up with that. And I know you had some specific questions.
Thank you.
Before you ask though, let me ask, and Jessica, I think you were going to touch this, but I mean, we're here to talk about the parcels that are being added to the zoning, right? Versus talking about Viridia. You know, that's not what this is about. This case that we're doing is we're adding some donut parcels that were contemplated in the zoning. I'm happy to ask some general questions, you know, about Viridia, but that shouldn't be what this meeting is about. I don't know, Jessica, can you provide some clarity there too?
Sure. And Scott, the meeting started a little bit earlier, so
sorry.
I did. No, it's
I
okay.
was told to promptly log on at 6:25. So sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think there was a typo about the time.
I am a direction follower, so sorry about that.
That's okay, Scott. I was just going to let you know that I did go through the presentation already and gave them a background of Viridia as a whole and what our proposal is for the rezoning. But there are just a couple or a few questions so far that have been sparked just from the overall SD plan.
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry about that. Now I guess I'm on the lead lap, so to speak.
Suzanne, would you like to go ahead?
No, obviously they seem outside of the realm of what was expected to be discussed. So I'll pull my questions.
Well, I guess are y'all willing to work on increasing the biodiversity by increasing plant pollinator friendly flora? You know, staying with native flora and fauna.
I mean,
development
for these few parcels, potentially, you know, the property's over 1,000 acres. And so
I understand.
And I can't subject the overall 1,000 acres to new requirements just because we're trying to bring in some, you know, the donut parcels. So it's something we consider, but we try to be responsible developers. You know, we're already doing a tremendous amount of things for the town of Apex in general with this project. So I'm sure they went through that with the presentation. I wish I would have been able to hear some of it, but I mean, I think we're going to be dedicating hundreds of acres to parks and open space already. So I'm just hesitant to add new layers of new requirements when trying to bring in these donut holes for the overall development.
Is any of your RCA acreage outside what's regulatorily required of you to preserve?
How's that relevant?
I'm just curious.
I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, we just got the tree survey done for the overall development that's going to be coming in with the site plan that's been submitted to the town. And so the resource conservation area, I think the last calculation I saw was it was 116 acres. I think the zoning requires 100 acres in minimum. I think the last open space requirement or the open space calculation I saw, there's 150 acres as the minimum. I think we're going to be closer to 250 to 300. So I think in total, we're going to end up having 350 acres of non-developable acres of 1,000. So there's going to be significant conservation, preservation, active, passive, open space, transit-oriented development with all kinds of walking paths and trails and park designs and, all of those types of things is what's contemplated.
I'll chime in here, guys. Scott and the Veridia team, I appreciate your hopping on tonight. I think just overall the challenge for the Environmental Advisory Board would be recommending different conditions, as Scott said. I think it's worth taking a look at that rezoning map again that color codes the small portion inside of the larger overall project. I've done a fair amount of research on the existence of this, how different it was at the time. I also point out the wealth of information we have with former town councilman Bill Jensen here, who I believe is on the call, a depth of experience for this project. But with that being said, at the time that the project, this is in my opinion here, at the time the project came about and the distance that they went through this conditional rezoning, I believe is something that the board wishes it could do today, which was done back then, to go to designate, the 100+ acres of RCA, the 150+ acres of open space. The slide that they showed earlier, the bike lanes, the connectivity, walkability, and the commitment to economic development and the overall project is something, it's like a live, work, play, sustainable, renewable energy, humongous solar commitment. I'd struggle with making additional requirements in the tiny little areas that don't apply to the rest of the development. Especially if we don't,
because the area, I echo, because the whole area that we're bringing in, the vast majority of it in the town center, it will all be master planned together, to where, the whole town center side, I think, is over 400 acres over there. We're going to be recruiting large, hopefully economic development users that have been going to places like Holly Springs and elsewhere, the Amgens of the world and the MetLifes that go to Cary and, the Fujifilm type things. We're recruiting some large fish, if you will, for economic development for the west side of the property. And the 4 parcels around the interchange there, I truly believe in the reason they were not included is because they didn't know where the parcel lines were, because the interchange wasn't built either. So when the original zoning went forward, the interchange wasn't constructed. Then the interchange got constructed by the government, and then there were some residual parcels. And so it's not I don't think it's an accident why there's those 4 parcels around the interchange there. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I concur with what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I'll finish with part 2. While I think the overall project at the time was groundbreaking, it was a humongous undertaking for the town staff, I know, and the town council back then. At the same time, I think what is in our purview as environmental stewards for the town is the proposed rezoning. And I think a couple pieces that really jump off the page to me are the water bodies that are there. Suzanne mentioned the 17 interchanges. I don't believe those are on the new proposed rezoning areas, but there are some. The satellite images show some pretty significant sized. I don't know if they're runoff ponds or what, but
we can't commit to saving those. I mean, we can't. Sorry. I mean, if they're non-jurisdictional, we will have to remove them. We will follow the approved jurisdictional maps that are approved by the Army Corps of Engineers, and we're going through a whole individual permit process for the environmental mitigation. So we will be paying a fair, large sum into an environmental mitigation bank for our stream impacts associated with the road crossings and those types of things. But I can't commit today to keeping those water bodies. We will work within the rules established by the Army Corps of Engineers in DEQ. for those impacts.
I hear you on that, Scott. I do think those concerns expressed by Mike and Suzanne, though, Megan, can be noted in our minutes from today. I think they're related, you know, when we talk about this being passed in 2011, right? I think many priorities have changed in the last 10 years. One of my concerns is I think there's been so much other development in the area. My question for you is, do you feel like the stormwater controls are going to be adequate?
Yeah, they have to be. They have to be. I mean, we don't design haphazardly. There's a set of established criteria for which you have to design stormwater for pre and post. I mean, we will follow the rules, and all the stormwater will be designed and stamped and approved by a registered professional engineer in the state of North Carolina. So I feel very confident we'll be able to mitigate all the stormwater through the site. And by clustering things makes that easier. You know, we're going to have higher density pods in various locations with, you know, the connectivity and the green spaces in between. And I think that will help us control the stormwater. We're even looking at regional stormwater facilities versus a bunch of small ponds, you know, larger facilities that can also be kind of converted to environmental features, or, you know, and I know I saw one of the things about irrigating from ponds as one of the standard conditions. You know, those types of things, you know, when I say we can't commit to them, there's certainly, all of them are our goals. You know, if we can get a pond and it can hold water, we'll probably irrigate from it. But if we build a pond and it just won't hold water because of the percolation through the ground, we can't make that commitment and go do a clay liner that is abundantly expensive, you know, to provide an irrigation source. It's just the cost of goods and everything, and cost of land is just too much today, unfortunately.
I have a question, maybe it's more for Amanda. Why is this in SD conditional zoning rather than a PUD or one of the others?
There were enough unique things about this development, and again, I wasn't with the town whenever this was created.
Just for the record, I was at no part of the existing SD plan either. Bill Jensen was probably the only one on this call that was around,
Yeah.
you know, when it was originally approved.
So and that was suggested back then, that, you know, staff did suggest, why don't you just go with a pub? But there was a desire to create something unique and special by the original developer that had a goal of mixed use, you know, that what someone else mentioned, live, work, play, sustainable, where it's almost like a little small town in and of itself. So we'll have, you know, the plan has everything from single family all the way to industrial and everything in between, including the open space, school reservation, you know, and an extensive road and greenway network. And so there was the zoning district set up to allow basically this development.
And I don't know if it went over with you, but even as that was established, there's a UDO section that contemplates bringing parcels in for this reason exactly.
I reviewed that with them.
Okay.
Yeah. So as far as history, that's kind of as much as I can give you off the top of my head.
And I don't think I even lived in North Carolina when it was zoned.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. I mean, that is helpful. I just wonder, given, and this is just a comment, just given the way things are laying out, if it's meeting the spirit of a sustainable development. And I will comment that it does seem like that the transportation aspect is sort of superseding the environmental sensitivity aspect of it.
If you can convince the state that we don't need those roads, I would be your biggest fan.
Yeah, there's a lot of commitment in this area when you talk about up to 8,000 residential units and the millions of square footage of various non-residential uses. We have to have a road network in place to move people around. And so and there will also be greenways and bicycle lanes, multi-use paths, side paths. So all of that will be constructed, you know, along the roadways as well to hopefully allow people to walk and not necessarily get in their cars for everything within the development. But I do see your perspective where there are competing interests, but when you're talking about building a city, you know, Apex was once all trees and farmland at one time too. I'm talking about the heart, the core, and eventually that was developed out. And so hopefully this is set up to be done in a way that's more environmentally sensitive than when original Apex was built 150 years ago.
But let me ask you a question though. You said that you don't feel from your review of this zoning case that you don't think that the project is meeting the spirit of the intent of the original zoning. I guess I would ask you, what do you see that makes you say that?
I see, I mentioned this perhaps before you got on, I see a lot of if practicable, and this is our goal. And, you know, if we can't meet this goal, we'll just revert back to what the base laws and regulations are.
Hey, real quick, Suzanne, when this whole Viridia came to the town initially, there was a lot of accommodations, a lot of thought put into the process of the approval of this site as to where it is today. I mean, there was UDO amendments. There was a lot of stuff that took place to get this site to where it is today. So, I mean, yes, I 100%. I hear what you're saying as part of the board. Also, it's you know, yeah, things have changed, but you know, from where they are today to in this small section we're actually reviewing tonight, then you know that's you know, I think we need to ask truly on what we're reviewing this evening, what potential things can we change there versus like I said, the site's is already there.
I agree, Patrick, but we're looking at something that was approved 10 years ago. I've got some recommendations that I think are consistent with the original concept of the plan and all, and that would further our environmental aims on the board. I would recommend that we, under the planning and landscaping section, we ask that they adopt item C, item K, and under lighting efficiency, they adopt item D.
John, would you just go ahead and read those items, please?
Yeah, item C is increase biodiversity. Option 1 would be plant pollinator friendly flora. Option 2 would be plant native flora. Planning and landscaping K would be add information signage or other marking at the boundary of lots where they are adjacent to a wooded or natural condition resource conservation area, indicating that the area behind the sign is RCA and is not to be disturbed. We've had some issues in the area with people going ahead and treating those as private property, their own private property, and I think that signage would be useful. Under lighting D, include dark sky compliance standards. Outdoor lighting shall be shielded. Lighting minimizing the emission of blue light and keeping the color temperature of 3000 Kelvin or less.
Does Apex Power do all that?
Apex Power does have 3500 K, and that's the new UDO standard for lights.
So how can we do something against the Apex Power standards?
I think they can order less, but their standard now is 3500.
Right now, the standard is 35.
So have you made those recommendations to Apex Power? I'm just curious, you know, that would, rather than imposing these things on individual developments, it seems like that'd be.
We don't have any say over Apex Power.
Gotcha. You know, I think the other things are pretty reasonable. You know, what I will say is we're responsible developers. You know, the things like signing the RCA and all that stuff, we do that anyway. We do it on every project we've ever had. I'm just not used to having the government tell me that we have to do that. You know, we take responsible development very seriously. We always do. Anytime that the local municipal or the local power companies will do it, we always, I call them the hats on top of the lights to keep the light pollution from the upstairs. I live next to one of those street lights that didn't have one. It just takes doing that one time. I'll never forget that again. We've even been going through and asked the municipalities and the power companies to put dimming features on the lights. So in the evenings between, after kids go inside, they can dim the lights remotely and put the controls on them and all those types of things. You know, happy to consider some of those things, but if Apex Power can't do it, I got no other way.
They can't do it. It's that they're not required to do it at this point.
So you would recommend that we ask Apex Power to do something different?
This isn't just on street lighting.
Yeah, for the vast right, but that's where the vast majority of light pollution comes from, is street lighting. I mean, people in their homes and stuff, the lights are off at night. I mean, they might have bedrooms and, you know, a couple of back porches and that sort of thing, but the primary light pollution primarily comes from street lights.
Commercial buildings.
Yeah, I think commercial buildings will have to have sufficient lighting for safety. So
those are my recommendations.
Okay. I think the landscaping stuff, we're big proponents of drought tolerant native plant species. Got no reason to bring something from outside of the state. You know, we've oftentimes consult with the local municipality about keeping track of what trees and what things are viable today versus something that might have some issues with health. Like I know there's maple trees. A lot of people are putting a moratorium on maple trees because there's been some recent disease with them. There's another type of tree that has got some kind of bug infestation. You know, so we pay attention to all of those things too. We've even talked to the town about our recommendation is they should try to get, or I think Diane had actually mentioned to me that there's some advocacy for getting an urban forester, you know, on the site. We'd be a real proponent of that. So we have somebody to consult with, you know, as we go through and we pick the right plant materials. We do that in consultation, you know, with the government and what lives and thrives here. And typically an urban forester, they have those kinds of experiences where they know the things that thrive, but they also know the things that don't, which are even more important. So, you know, again, you guys don't know me from Adam. We're real responsible developers. So forgive me if I seem a little, I can't commit to more things. The project has so many requirements already that it's almost overwhelming, the things that we will be doing and undertaking for the project. So that's the reason for me, for my hesitancy for simply just agreeing for more regulation.
I appreciate that, Scott. I think some of those things you said were actually the type of specificity that we needed to hear. The one comment I do want to make to you is we do have town staff on the call, but the members of the board are Apex community members, not members of town staff or members of government.
Sure. Thanks for that clarification. Sorry if I kind of crossed the two there. But
Sure.
I think Amanda can speak. You know, as we've had this property in the contract, we've been in constant communication with Amanda and Diane and several other people at the town staff. We're very collaborative people. You know, we even had and again, I know I say out one side of my mouth, I don't want to talk about the larger project, but then I keep talking about the larger project. But you know, when we got this property first under contract from the existing landowner, we held this thing called a charrette. What a charrette is when you bring people from all walks of wherever to be able to provide input on a plan. And so that includes residential developers, multifamily developers, office developers, retail developers, but also includes marketing people. We had market kind of research analysts in the room. And we invited everybody from the town. Amanda was there, Diane was there, transportation was there, utilities were there, because we really, really believe in the public-private partnership of these developments. Because I'm a firm believer, especially something this big, if we don't have a firm public-private partnership, we have no chance of success. especially when it comes to something about luring some economic development to places like this. That, you know, it's the public-private partnership is absolutely important, and it means the world to us. I mean, I think Amanda can probably speak to that. Is we really try to embrace that.
Scott, this too is something that is these are recommendations that we ask developers to consider when we do talk about this, these different items. So that's just, as I said, just something we ask you that you consider.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. And I promise, if we're able to close on this property and take it forward, everybody on this call will be very, very happy and pleased with and proud of what we left behind when we're finished. You know, something else like trees. I'm talking about environmental stuff. I told the town of Apex Transportation Department I would fight them to the death for a street tree program. They don't want it. They don't want stuff in the right of way. I believe in it with all of my being that street trees make a difference. We can replace a lot of the trees that we cut down. They provide shade on the road. They provide shade on the walking paths, and they have countless upside for it. So that's something I can't commit to today because some folks at the town I don't have them convinced yet, but I told them that I will not stop until I've got them on board with it. It means that much to us. And
well, so we certainly that.
So that's just an example of us trying to be responsible developers without somebody telling us we have to be.
Do other members of the board have questions or concerns or recommendations?
Well, I guess from recommendations side of things, I guess we really we got to the recommendations that John brought up. A couple of things that Suzanne brought up, but it was again, I think those are reasonable recommendations that we would ask of you, Scott, and your team.
Megan, can you review the recommendations for us, please?
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So Megan, remind me, do the recommendations include those not discussed in the meeting? Because some of those, I think the EAB additions are some that were emailed, but are they the recommendations of the board? That is what the board can vote on this evening.
The recommendations need to be at least explained to the to the applicant, unless the applicant's already seen the recommendations.
I've not.
Oh, well, so all of the recommendations here, the first 4 were sent to the developer team and the applicant ahead of time. And then the last 3 were ones that were discussed here this evening. The ones above, the energy, water, air, community, those were included on the pre-application request form.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. Sorry. Now I'm up to speed. Thank you for that, Megan.
And just to be clear, these are recommendations that are forwarded from our board to town council. They are not binding on you at this time, but they are things for town council to consider.
If I would like to add one more, since they're just considerations.
Let's add them all.
Oh, I would love that. Honestly, I mean, you know, if it's a sustainable development, you know, I think all of them would be appropriate. However, under its water quality, increased pervious surface, letter E, option 2, modify curb and gutters to provide stormwater infiltration and evaporation, such as swale only reverse curves. Silva sells curb cuts with rain gardens. And perhaps option 3 as well, utilize green street design.
So I'm just reading through these. I mean, there's so many of these that are already in the SD plan. Like, what's the purpose of adding these as an additional layer on top of what's already in the SD plan? I'm trying to understand what does that accomplish for.
Can you tell us specifically which ones are laid out in the SD plan?
I mean, I'd have to go through and look at each individual one of those, but I don't know.
Scott, I would say if that's the case, then you're already doing it, and that's great.
And that's what you have to say. You're already doing it.
This is Jessica Bolin in Stormwater. I do have just a question about the bullet, when it says recommendation to manage the 10-year, 25-year, and 100-year storm. I think that needs to be clearer. I mean, right now the 10-year is required. So, are we asking for the 25 and the 100, or are you recommending that site-wide, or?
Jessica, I wish Bill was still with us. He dropped off about 30 minutes ago due to technical difficulties, so he's not here to defend his own recommendation, but I believe that was his intent to go, I think, beyond the 10-year storm to accommodate for the 25 and 100-year storm.
That could be just a little clearer, because the 10-year right now is required, as is, as our rules currently state. So if it just says recommendation to go up to the 25-year and the 100-year, that would be, or I mean, yeah, not go up. I guess we can work on the wording, but recommendation to treat
beyond,
yeah, up to the 25 and 100-year. But it just needs to be clear, like, are we going to say you need to do the 100-year, and they're going to commit to that, or sometimes that's not the best idea depending on where you are in the watershed. So just blanketly saying that is, it could do more harm than good in some places. Just something to be aware of.
And I see the recommendation for 25% of the electrical usage to be by solar. Is there any other property in the town of Apex that can meet that requirement today? Is there any other project other than maybe the SAS campus that does that in the triangle?
I think this is Marilee, and I'm going to jump in, and I may be off topic a little bit, but just to help you understand where we are coming from with this board, we are trying to improve the standards. So by saying, is there anything at this point, the answer very well may be no, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be. We should be trying to move forward, not accepting things of the past as good enough. So that's my 2 cents. I hope that helps you understand where we're coming from a little bit.
Sure, it absolutely does. I've always had a rule of thumb that I operate is I'm not trying to be serial number 1 through 5 of anything. So if it's done and replicated and shown to be successful, we're all for it. Don't know that we can be the pioneer for it.
I understand that, but we are, making recommendations regarding solar conduit, et cetera, in all of, I won't say all because it's not true of every property, but everyone that it seems like it may be a proper suggestion. We are doing that for everyone.
Sure.
And Scott, that's also pertinent to residential and commercial, so it's not just one is singled out moving forward.
And just a little bit of commentary about adding some of those things. I mean, the environment and protecting the environment is absolutely a crisis in the country. I'm a firm believer in global warming and everything associated with that. But I'll tell you another crisis that's right behind is affordable housing. And adding cost and layers of cost to the home building into the construction, it's not going to help the crisis of affordable housing in the area. So just keep that in mind as we.
Yeah, we're all that.
So it's that delicate balance, you know.
Scott, in your SD plan, is there a dedicated percentage of housing to affordable housing?
Nope.
Okay.
Affordable housing wasn't a crisis when this was approved.
Yeah, Katie, when this was all approved initially back in 11 or whenever it was, that wasn't one of the requirements that had to be met as it is today.
And it is a crisis. There's no doubt. When you ask your guy who's waiting on you at a restaurant where he has to drive from because he can't afford to live in town, it's a hard message to hear. But, you know, so what we do to try to help with affordable housing, that's not what this is about, is we provide housings of all sizes and shapes, but you don't have to be wealthy to live in one of our developments. But we go to great lengths to help ensure that we can offer the best value for what the customer's buying too.
I appreciate that. I think many of our concerns just stem from the fact that the SD plan is 10 years old at this point. And it feels like a lot of things in Apex have changed in the last 10 years, and maybe a lot of things in the world as well. So our recommendations, which so you know, are similar recommendations that we've made to many other developers, they'll go forward to town council, and then town council really weighs them, you know, against their other priorities, right? And as you said, you're filling in donut holes. So I think that's going to tip heavily in your favor. But it's so that town council can know how concerned residents of Apex are feeling currently and what their current concerns are.
Totally fair. That's totally fair. And I will say when we're finished, you guys will love what we've done. The responsibility that we bring to what we do. I live around here, you know, I gotta look back at something and be proud of it versus contributing to a problem. Because we're not world conquerors. We're not trying to do every development. We're not about production and build as many homes or build as many this or build as many that as fast as humanly possible. We're community developers. We develop communities, not subdivisions. So, you know, I think that everybody will be very happy when we're finished with this project.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the list of recommendations?
I'll make a motion to go ahead and approve.
Thanks, Patrick.
I'll second.
Thank you, Marilee. I will vote in favor. Suzanne?
I will abstain.
Okay. Patrick, I'm assuming you're voting in favor since you made the motion.
Yes, ma'am.
John?
Aye.
Bill is off the call. Kim?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Mike?
I think I'm a no on this one.
A no on the list of recommendations.
Yeah.
Okay. Marilee?
Aye.
I believe, Megan, you can confirm that with me. I believe that still passes.
Yeah, I you know what, Katie, I'm
sorry?
gonna pull my statement of aye. I'm not gonna vote for it.
Are you abstaining or are you opposing?
Yes.
You're abstaining. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5. I believe it still passes, correct, Megan?
I mean, I can vote if you want me to. You didn't ask me to. I'm happy to.
Katie, that's
Thank you for
5
your
yeses.
time, sir.
Yeah, that's what I have too. Yep. All right. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone. This was very insightful. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Sorry, can we see each other again? Sorry.
I'll share.
Yeah, Amanda, if you can close that
Thanks.
share screen out, there you go.
Thank you. Megan, would you like to talk about the potential UDO amendments, or would you prefer I talk about them?
You go for it.
Okay. So since we thought we had a light agenda for today, although perhaps not, Megan and Suzanne and I chatted a little bit about, kind of pushing forward with things that we've been batting around but have not made progress on recently. And so the next two items relate to that. I do think, and we don't have to finalize anything tonight, but one thing I would like us to be thinking about as a group and making progress on is, are there certain recommendations that we make that the vast majority of developers agree to and that we think also are critically important? And if so, let's start to nail down what some of those are and propose them to town council to become amendments in the UDO. And then once that happens, they're required of all developers and all projects. And then we do not have to go over those week by week individually with developers.
I think that is tremendous, just for the fact of, well, it kind of keeps us from almost asking the same thing with every applicant when it comes through.
Right. And that would be exactly the hope, right? And
Yep.
It's things that we've identified that generally developers say yes to, but also that we've identified as important to us.
Absolutely.
I do think for the dark sky work group, one of the most obvious things could be related to lighting, because that is something we talk about with almost every project. So perhaps when you guys meet, perhaps you want to think about some specific language that you might like to see us propose to town council.
We're currently working on updating the entire section of the UDO, so we want to just hand you the section and say, get this selected instead.
That sounds even better.
Amanda, just out of curiosity, with us going through this whole UDO and modification, how does that affect the town's electric facilities to kind of, I'm not gonna say back up and punt again, but change what they have in stock today, which is not a whole lot, but just how, I know they're short of transformers and everything right now, but how does that affect how they go about changing street light and so forth? Like I said, I'm just asking because I know they had a program that came through about a year ago where they switched out a lot of the acorn style lighting, or the lighting where to more the dark sky type of heads to the poles. So
Right. So one thing to keep in mind is that street lights are not regulated by the UDO. They're in the right of way, and the UDO regulates what happens on private property. I mean, town land owned by the town, like town campus, would be private property as well. It's just a public owner. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The street lights are separate. So as far as lights on within developments and what Apex Electric is able to provide, what we'll do is when the board has a draft of the amendments, I have to go through them. I have to go through the whole UDO to make sure there's not unintended consequences or ripple effect changes, because I tell you, it's a snowball. Once you make one change, it can often it can get really big. And then we'll review it with legal if necessary, if we have any concerns. And of course, we'll review it with Apex Electric. And in fact, the electric director probably provided the draft that the EAB is starting with, if I remember correctly. We just haven't had the staff capacity to work on this. It has been one of planning's goals to do this, but we have very little to no capacity at this time. So it's helpful that the board is taking, and there are members taking an initiative to propose some amendments.
Yeah, thank you.
Without fleshing out anything in terms of language today, are there other suggested zoning conditions that we might want to be thinking about incorporating into the UDO?
Well, the pet waste stations always seems to come up, but I'm trying to figure out how you would incorporate that in the UDO. Maybe developments of a certain size have to have them or something. I don't know. I'll leave that to the staff to.
Well, I think that's something you probably get Angela involved in as well. And Amanda, am I right with that as far as the pet waste stations and how they tie back to the greenway trails and so forth?
I mean, yeah, the staff is going to want some guidance from the board of what you want to see. We can definitely respond and offer suggestions whether we think it's reasonable or not, but I would not want to leave that solely up to staff.
Yeah, I will say this right here. I do feel like there's the need for additional trash trash receptacles and pet waste stations along these areas. I know they get installed, and a lot of times they're at the trailheads, which are good, and it makes it easy to get to them and clean. But at the same time, the paths are also made for the vehicles to travel, traverse down from Parks and Rec. So
that could come up. The Parks and Rec department is currently updating the parks master plan. And I don't know if this fine detail of an item is included in that master plan or not, but that might be something to coordinate with Angela Reinke with Parks and Rec.
Like I said, and again, just speaking from a developer standpoint, as long as the developer knows kind of what their requirements are going to be, they can allocate the money for it. It's hard to not know what the requirements are, and then it gets put out there, and then you're having to back into your budget. But but like I said, this will be, and it's just like with the solar panel, and then providing the I guess the electric car hookups. At least they know it's coming and they can plan for it.
One recommendation I have, this is Marilee, is the increasing to 3 to 4 native trees per however that reads. Yep. And that would be a really easy change to make in the UDO, because I think in the UDO it's just 2 per however many, feet or acres or whatever, and just to bump that up. Going from 2 to 3 or 4 is not, doesn't seem that it's that much of an increase in biodiversity would not give developers headaches. So maybe we could go ahead and make that change permanent.
Amanda, question for you. This is part of the EAB's mission, but not something that we've done before. What is the most helpful way for us to do it? Should we, perhaps write a list of things that could be considered over the next few months? How specific would you want language to be or not be? What's our best method?
Get me another staff person.
Fair. That's fair.
I mean,
I don't think any of us expect anything to happen immediately, but it is something that's been on our radar for a while that we know we need to be thinking about. And
yeah, no, I know exactly what you're asking, and I do appreciate the question. It depends on the amendment that's proposed, that's desired. So for instance, there was the desire for a pet waste station in some neighborhoods, maybe of a certain size. Well, what is that? What is that size? Is it a subdivision of 5 lots, or is it a subdivision of 50, or so that's where we would need some direction. And if it's going to be in the UDO, then we're probably going to need some general idea of where it should be. There, you can't have anything subjective. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about standards that need to be added to the UDO. They need to be objective, clear-cut standards that don't have, room for interpretation.
I think that's probably something you go with, maybe either linear footages of greenway or linear footages of sidewalks.
Every 500 feet of greenway, you have a waste receptacle or pet waste station or something like that.
Yeah, I'd be cautious about adding anything about greenways to the UDO. I think we need to be focused on residential development for that, and let the Parks Department handle their standards for greenway and public park systems, because there's, we're talking about a lot more volume of these stations and the maintenance responsibility and cost and everything that goes along with that. And that's really out of my purview. But
Yeah,
I don't think
outside of the greenway, the HOA would maintain it. So if
right.
And through that, like I said, that all can be set up with assessments, and that's the stuff that need to know early.
Right. And so if there's a particular standard, like the number of trees, I'm not quite thinking, it's not coming right to my head where the minimum standard of 2 native species is in the UDO. I'm not really sure where that is. I do know that we have a requirement to follow the design and development manual and the trees that are listed there. But if there's a preference to have either buffers or just all vegetation that's required to be planted to have a certain number, a minimum number of native species, then I think that can be incorporated. So I just need to know what the proposal is, and then we can work on the amendments to incorporate those. And then if we have questions as we're developing those amendments, we can bring those back to you to say, is this what you intended? Well, we can definitely bring the draft back to you before we move it forward to planning board and town council. And just, there are times when there's certain UDO amendments, especially if it involves a policy shift, significant policy shift, that we will review with the planning committee of town council before we take it forward to the planning board and the full town council for public hearing.
And Amanda, just for clarification, I'm not exactly sure where Marilee's suggestion is in the UDO either, but it's specifically native hardwood tree species.
I'll find it. And I passed that on to Megan once before, so I'm sure I can find it again.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's specifically native hardwood tree species, planted to 3, preferably 4. And then also, Katie, to your question, I think this is perhaps what Shelley was speaking to a couple of meetings ago, where she tasked the board to prioritize UDO amendments. Yeah. And I think at the time of the potentially 3 that we had discussed in the past, really the only one that the board deemed relevant was the lighting standards. And so I think now today, this is a new conversation of what other UDO amendments would the board be interested in partaking in. And so I think 1, prioritizing those would be beneficial. And then 2, considering forming another work group like the dark sky work group, I think would be helpful.
That's what I was going to suggest. And even if it's just a group that meets once or twice, but I guess my question would be, should we try to meet with Amanda or Shelley when we meet?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, the dark sky work group, Shelley is a part of that, and she attends all of the meetings. So
okay.
I'm happy to participate. And another thing that we have to keep in mind is there's state legislation that may hamper our ability to do certain things, and there's constant changes to state legislation. And Marilee, I did find that reference to 2 native species, and that reference is when you're replanting and repairing vegetation in a riparian buffer area. It's very specific to riparian buffers, and I think areas that damage.
The question came up of things that would be very specific that could be changed in the UDO. So obviously one thing that will help with, our biodiversity and desire for native plants is any place that something like that can easily be changed to increase the biodiversity of plants that are be putting back in. That's why it came to mind, because that's like a quick number change. So to keep the whatever it says about, so many native trees per whatever the section of land was. So the section of land remains the same. It's just the number of the native hardwood trees that go in.
Yes, I
That's what I
agree.
was.
Yes, and that
Okay.
standard only applies to riparian buffer, restoration, or enhancement. It's not a minimum standard for, it's not a minimum planting standard for new development. It only applies to riparian buffer, restoration, or enhancement.
I understand, but that was, like I said, that came to mind from memory, so that I wanted to throw that out as an example that I thought would be a quick, down and dirty, go ahead and change it in the UDO. That's all.
Probably in the interest of time, and the next agenda item also involves taking some volunteers. So perhaps we'll suggest, if anyone's interested in thinking over some possible UDO amendments, please email that interest to Megan, and we'll work on that. And the next agenda item is one of mine, and feel free to object to it. But when we had the group meeting with our board and TreeCap and B City, one of the things that I asked members of those committees for is if they could help us with the specificity of our language in the suggested zoning conditions. The TreeCap and the B City just have more detailed knowledge than we do and spend more time on specific issues than we do. So I had asked them if they could help us with the language of the suggested zoning conditions that relate to what their committees do. They have not been meeting as regularly as we have. So my hope is that perhaps one of you would like to volunteer to attend one or two of their meetings and work on making sure that the language we have in our suggested zoning conditions is as helpful and as tight as it can be.
Sure, I will.
Can I nominate you to go to B City, Marilee?
Yes, I would love that.
Wonderful.
I can go to the tree cap if you want.
Wonderful.
If nobody else has a burning desire.
I was
Well, I
hoping,
might go with you because I got some trees to get rid of.
would nominate yourselves, so I'm thrilled. So that sounds great. Does everyone else feel comfortable with our liaisons? Great.
And I will coordinate to make sure that is added to their agendas for their next meetings.
Thank you. Thank you. And if it takes a meeting or two because they haven't met, I think that's fine. But I think we just want to get the ball rolling.
Hey, Amanda, just a random question. When we bring up the pollinator gardens to the applicants and so forth, is there specific planning material that that we're asking them to install?
I can't answer that question. I don't review a lot of site plans and subdivisions these days. I'm doing other things. I do know that we coordinate with our zoning compliance officers and one of which is, I believe, on the B City committee. We do make suggestions about what would be appropriate, and there may be some of those materials listed in the design and development manual. I can't remember that offhand, but that's something I can follow up with Shelley, and she can provide you with some information on that at the next.
Yeah, that would be good. Like I said, I know I'm getting ready to go into a fairly large site with one of them. That's quite a big area, but just making sure that what we are, what the applicant of these new communities or new developments or new commercial, whatever it may be, they know what what the requirements are and what they need to be looking after. So it's we're very familiar with the wet ponds and SCM requirements are as far as plant material goes. But again, making sure that the plant material for these pollinator gardens also are consistent with the other vegetation that's called out throughout the community as far as foundation plantings, street trees, that kind of stuff, where they're not, I don't want to say fighting against each other, but making sure they kind of complement each other.
Okay.
Does anyone have any topics for open discussion? Look at us, we're gonna make it just before 7:30.
Now, don't you know better than to jinx it? Come on.
Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, John. Do
And
we have
I'll
a second? Thanks, Mary Lee.
second.
I'll vote in favor. Suzanne?
Aye.
Patrick? Kim?
Aye.
Greg?
Hi.
Mike?
Guys, I think I'm a yes on this one.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Thanks, you guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
David. Thank you, Amanda.
Have a great night, everybody.
Good
See you
night.
guys.
Cool. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Sounds good. All right. Bye.
Push it again. All right.